was the founder of the Weather Channel. CNN has taken a very strong position on global warming that it is a consensus. Well, there is no consensus in science. Science isn't a vote. Science is about facts. And if you get down to the hard, cold facts, there's no question about it. Climate change is not happening. There is no significant man-made global warming now. There hasn't been any in the past, and there's no reason to expect any in the future. There's a whole lot of baloney, and yes, it has become a big political point of the Democratic Party and part of their platform, and I regret it's become political instead of scientific, but the science is on my side.
97% of climate scientists agree.
No.
The government puts out about $2.5 billion directly for climate research every year. It only gives that money to scientists who will produce scientific results that support the global warming hypothesis of the Democrat Party position. So they don't have any choice. If you're going to get the money, you got to support their position. Therefore, 97% of the scientific reports published support global warming. Why? Because those are the ones the government pays for, and that's where the money is. It's real simple. But that doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't make it true. That only makes it bought and paid for. There are 31,000 scientists who have signed a petition that says it is not valid. Will prevail in time. None of this alarmism about ice and heat waves and droughts, none of it is happening. Climate change is not happening. There's a whole lot of baloney.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Brock Lawley program. My name is Brock Lawley. I am your fearless host. And this show is going to be about global warming. Or more broadly, it's going to be about the environmental fear-mongers. It's going to be about scare tactics. It's going to be about lies. In history, the greatest enemy to leftism, and leftism is your greatest enemy in domestic America by far, is truth. Substantive truth. That's what we're going to deal with. Now, you've heard this millions of times, right? The earth is overpopulated. We're breeding like rabbits. We're eating like locusts. We're going to run out of food. We're going to run out of farmland. We're going to run out of fuel. This spaceship that we call Earth is dwindling provisions. We need to abort the mission. Our industrial technology is poisoning our water, our soil, our air. We need to make radical changes. Those radical changes need to all empower and grow the state, by the way. That's important. Note that. And if we don't do this immediately, we're all going to die.
Those are the feelings.
But this is the truth, guys. This is the meat and potatoes of this podcast. Fear-mongering, specifically fears about running out of resources, are as old as the human race, certainly as old as leftism. A quick history lesson. It started with the 19th century demographer Thomas Malthus. In his early writings, he predicted that a swelling human population would quickly overtake our food population, leading to widespread famine. He was wrong, of course. Didn't happen, still hasn't happened. He changed his tune a couple years after that, but didn't discourage a long line of copycat wannabes, recycling and updating these old arguments, just kind of moving the date forward. You know, these 1980s Bible prophecy guys that are just moving the date of Jesus' return. The 1960s, the 1970s were dense with doomsday declarations of these big government leftist outfits like Club of Rome warned that we'd be using up all our resource and the population bomb, 1968 biologist Paul Ehrlich. Let's listen to some of this stuff.
People like Paul Ehrlich, and that's a great pal, of course, that's now appointed to be the science czar for the U.S. It says, who predicted vast coastlines would be evacuated due to rotting fish by 1980, the black blizzard of sand covering a continent by 1995. And this is a Paul Ehrlich speech at the British Institute for Biology, September 1971. By the year 2000, the United Kingdom will simply be a small group of impoverished islands inhabited by some 70 million hungry people. If I were a gambler, I would take even money that England will not exist in the year 2000. And in 10 years, all important animal life in the sea will be extinct. Large areas of coastline will have to be evacuated because of the stench of dead fish. And that was the Ehrlich speech of an Earth Day, at the United Nations Earth Day 1970. By 1995, the greenhouse effect would be desolating the heartlands of North America and Eurasia, with horrific drought causing crop failures and food riots. By 1996, the Platte River of Nebraska would be dry, while a continent-wide black blizzard of prairie topsoil will stop traffic on interstates, strip paint from houses and shut down computers. 1990. Then if present trends continue, the world will be 11 degrees colder by the year 2000. This is about twice what it would take to put us in an ice age. That was Kenneth E.F. Watt, no relation to mine, in Earth Day 1970, that their guess was an ice age. A general warming trend of the North Pole is melting the polar ice cap and may produce an ice-free Arctic Ocean by the year 2000. That was in the Christian Science Monitor, June 8, 1972. Using computer models, researchers concluded that global warming would raise average annual temperatures nationwide 2 degrees by the year 2010. Associated Press, May 15th, 1989. By 1985, air pollution will have reduced the amount of sunlight reaching Earth by 1/2. Life magazine, January 1970.
Guys, I'm not kidding. I could literally let this kind of stuff play for hours. That's not an exaggeration. And the population bomb, Ehrlich, he said England had a 50% chance of even seeing the 20th century. Obviously wrong. The book opened with a mathematical certainty. He said the battle to feed all of humanity is over, period, end of sentence. In the 1970s, the world will undergo famines. Hundreds of millions of people are going to starve to death. Now, despite this perfect losing streak, followed up by clowns, circus clowns like Al Gore, exactly the same track record. Make prediction, does not come true. Lean on some computer model, call it science, make fun of everybody who disagrees with you, never actually debate substance. Let's listen to Al Gore testifying before Congress about his carbon credit get-rich scheme that he's calling global warming science.
Man-made global warming pollution causes global warming. It's not an open issue.
It's your opinion. Obviously, you've stated it many times. Would you talk to the cause?
Opinion of the global
and not unanimity. There are others on the other side.
More important, corporate carbon polluters who have lied.
We talk about carbon polluters. You talk about them back in 1997 when you were vice president. Enron's CEO, Ken Lay, was involved in discussions with you at the White House about helping develop this trading scheme. It's been reported.
I don't know, but I met with Ken Lay.
And clearly, you can see why so many of us are concerned about this type of cap and trade tax that would be literally turning over this country's energy economy. And I know you've got interest with Goldman Sachs. You're partnered in companies with executives from Goldman Sachs. And when you see the types of people involved in wanting to set up this kind of scheme, you can see why so many of us are concerned about turning our energy economy over to a scheme economy.
I don't really know if you want me to respond to that. I guess what you're trying to say, you're trying to...
I mean, clearly there will be big winners and big losers. And I'm saying that there are going to be big winners and big losers in this bill. And that's been discussed by everybody talking. Big winners and big losers. But some of the big winners, this trading scheme that would...
Enron,
He played on our fears. Those are the feelings.
What a joke these people are. And then they use this kind of nonsense in a condescending way. In a just world, in a sane world, a guy like Al Gore wouldn't be able to show his face in public. These morsel mental midgets. Hijacking science, hijacking politics, hijacking government to enrich themselves with nonsense. Every single time I tell you follow the money with these clowns.
Politicians don't need scientific evidence when they have billionaire allies like Tom Steyer, who recently donated over $100 million to Democrat politicians willing to promote the discredited global warming theory.
But the debate is settled. Climate change is a fact.
The Earth has not warmed in 17 years. But that fact can't compete with $100 million of campaign donations.
We should not allow a tiny minority of shoddy scientists to compete with scientific fact.
And it will require tough choices along the way.
Easy money for them means tough choices for us.
Get up dollar for dollar with pollution taxes.
More taxes and regulation won't change the weather. And America's energy policy should not be auctioned off to environmental extremists.
I mean, forget about all the rhetoric. The fact that these guys will not debate anybody, the fact that they're calling science consensus, it's so obviously a hoax. Anyway, the losing streak of these kind of guys. These warnings, they remain fodder for their every fundraising letter by Greenpeace or Foundation for Deep Ecology. And sadly, it's not just secular extremist environmental wackos. Occasionally, prominent Christians get in the game too, like Ron Sider, 1997, making this assertion with gusto. Industrial society is producing such severe environmental pollutions and degradations that the future for everyone, rich and poor alike, is in danger. We are all destroying our air, our forests, our lands, our water so rapidly that we face devastation. In the next century, unless we make major changes and turn our lives over to the government, we overfish our seas, we pollute our atmosphere, we're destroying topsoil forest and a unique species lovingly created by our Creator. Now, this is a unique annoyance to me, because guys like Ron Sider should know better. Sider and others blame this wanton rape and pillage on our present economic patterns, like I clearly read for you, maintaining the expansion of our material abundance. Sider and the rest of his choir poo-poo capitalism, calling it a Ponzi scheme, which is so ironic. They're just banging on the pots and pans of fears. These socialists actually have enough gall to tell us that we're robbing from future generations. But it's simply not true. It's all a bunch of lies, and we're going to talk about them. One by one, we're going to refute this nonsense substantively, economically, with common sense and facts. The great irony of this is that the truth is literally almost the exact opposite. As long as you can preserve your spirit of entrepreneurism, your capitalism, your free markets, you're not going to run out of resources, you're not going to run out of food, you're not going to run out of water, you're not going to run out of energy. These prophets of doom are demonstrably wrong. In fact, this is the painful thing. It's very healthy economies. It's capitalistic economies. It's economies that actually have prosperity, spillover prosperity, that tend to think about environmental issues, tend to clean up the ramifications of industry. This is what's so ridiculous about this nonsense. But like all lies, basically they build this house of nonsense and propaganda on a little tiny pea of truth, and they just have mattress after mattress after mattress after mattress of lies. And here's what I think deflects common sense, all right? Earth is a planet. It has a finite volume, mass, surface area. The surface of the Earth is like 510 million square kilometers. Basically, there's 148 million kilometers of land. That's rough numbers. And we can reach only a tiny bit of the Earth's mass near its surface. This is the place from which we draw things like oil, coal. With the left and the fearmongers and the big statists that really don't even care about the environment as a little side note. They just want to grow this state, and they just think this is another way to do it. They're going to try to use this as a model to get you to believe that we're quickly depleting all our natural resources. And this is the kicker. It's a misunderstanding of the meaning of resource, and they're omitting the biggest part, which is the wonder of human creativity, which is why everything in your house is there. It's not because there's dirt. It's not because there's coal. It's not because there's sludge coming out of the ground. It's because the human being is a creative instrument that can shape-shift things into usefulness, and let's talk about that. Leftist debates about resources, they're more heat than light. You criticize environmentalism, and they're going to claim that you hate the environment, right? That's pretty much a nutshell for Al Gore and every other clown that wears the jester outfit of this nonsense. But see, these guys, they're all like statist hacks, so I can almost disregard them because I know they're trying to line their pockets and they're trying to grow an elitist government. But what bothers me is the Christian ignorance. What bothers me is the Christian climbing on board with this pantheistic nonsense. You got green Bibles. It's pervasive. Well, let's talk about things that all Christians should be able to agree about. Stewardship. That's a word we all understand. Here's what God's word said. The earth is the Lord's, all that is in it, the world, and those who live in it. Psalm 24:1. God created human beings as his image bearers. He said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves upon the earth. This command infuriates materialists and atheists, infuriates them. In 1967, Lynn White wrote a famous paper for the Journal of Science, blaming the biblical view and blaming Christianity and man's domination of environment. White said this is the problem for everything. By destroying paganism and atheism and nihilism, Christianity made it possible to exploit nature. And we will continue to see everything worsen under the sun unless we reject Christianity in all its forms. Nature does not exist to serve man. Now, every single environmental student will hear this claptrap from White, every single one. No one will hear, unfortunately, in these classes that White is a biblical ignoramus, completely misreading the text, maybe even purposefully so. Okay, time for some truth. Nowhere in the Bible, nowhere does it say nature has no reason for existence save to serve man. And Genesis 1 speaks of dominion, not domination. The Bible's describing benevolent servants who represent a good God to the rest of creation. Part of God's good creation, as well as his crowning achievement. God saw everything he made. He said, indeed, that was very good. God intends for us to use and transform the natural world around us for good purposes. Tend and watch over, Genesis 2:15. Working and transforming the earth is a part of God's blessing. It's not a curse. Work and change did not arise from the fall of sin. Work into toil, the ground resisting our efforts to cultivate it did. The world is good, but it is also fallen. Creation is subject to futility. The whole creation is now groaning in labor pains. Romans. As fallen creatures in a fallen world, we also mess up. That's true. We pollute, we can act irresponsibly, so on and so forth. That's all true, but it's misleading and it's missing the point. And here's why I cover that. Because I think most Christians can agree on those principles, but we often fail to logically work out our faith. It's like we have fit bodies and fat minds, like Oz said. And because of that, we adopt materialistic, godless assumptions about culture and about our environment. And that's not right. Just because something feels right, you have to think about it, make sure it is right. Here's a real game changer, right? How often do you hear about resources? You pretty much hear about that every election. People think of the stuff that you can weigh, you can count: oil in the ground, land underfoot, water in a lake, gold bars in a vault. Some resources, a good quantity of them actually, are renewable. You cut down trees, you plant new ones, you don't have any fear of running out of lumber. In fact, the irony is, despite all this claptrap from the greenies, there's more trees on planet Earth today than there's ever been before, and that's because industry has a vested interest in creating lumber. So this is just nonsense when you hear about this stuff. Other resources are not renewable, however. Oil, coal, for example. So far as we know, and I mean, we might be wrong, oil reservoirs don't refill. On the surface, the warning makes sense, right? We're going to run out of everything. Resources. We're just being pillaged of our resources. The problem with these warnings is that they're regressive, which makes sense because the progressives among us are actually regressives. Regressives in almost every way, but that's another conversation. They make these claims based on known reserves of said resource, say oil, for example. How much oil we know exists today that has nothing to do with what we'll find tomorrow. And that has been proven over and over again. In fact, for the last 10 years, we've found an unbelievably big, huge, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of natural resources, coal, oil, natural gas, so on and so forth. They're just wrong because they're regressive, because they don't think about these things correctly. In other words, how much oil we know about doesn't tell us much about how much oil exists. Discovering oil, by the way, costs money. You wouldn't know that from the claptrap that leaves the Democratic Party lips. BP, ExxonMobil, etc. They have to lay out a lot of dough, a lot of greenbacks, digging a lot of dry oils until they find one. That's a crucial point. That's important to economics. You never hear about that stuff from the class warfare nonsense. Here's something Thomas Sowell said, and I think is brilliant. How much of any given natural resource is known to exist depends on how much it costs to know. That makes sense, right? This is exploration. These are people risking their own capital to go and find it because there's a profit margin. People don't just do this out of the goodness of their heart. They go because they can make money. That's why capitalism and profit isn't bad. The left don't like it, but it's not bad. And you know why you know it's not bad? Because your house is filled, again, with things that exist because there's a profit margin. And by the way, as current supplies of anything dwindle, demand spikes. Price of barrel goes up. Prices get high enough, it encourages oil companies or any other commodity seeker to go after new reservoirs, to go after new product. When they find new oil or new product, in the case of oil, they have to tap it, they have to estimate its size, they have to transport it, they have to refine it, they have to deliver it. New supplies of oil in markets regulate the price, making exploration profitable, making your life better, making energy cheaper. There's so much win here. But the left have alternative motives, trying to expose those with simple economic clarity. Nanny state regulations are a nightmare to you, by the way, and a nightmare to the poor, which is why I'm a capitalist, which is why if you're a Christian, you should be too, and you should care about the poor. That's why you should support free markets, because big government socialism and nanny state self-interest, they pick the winners and losers. This is horrible. Oil is still the best and cheapest source of energy. That's why we use it. Ingenuity will change this. Ingenuity will make it better. Here's a story I love. In the 1980s, an economist, Julian Simon, made a famous bet with refuted, embarrassed, ridiculous biology and environmentalist doomsdayer Paul Eldredge. Eldredge has been predicting nonsense for years and still gives lectures in universities, by the way, on your dime, despite being wrong every single solitary time. Anyway, Simon publicly bet $1,000 that over the next 10 years, the real price of any 5 commodities that Eldredge wanted to pick would go down, not up. Eldredge and his team of environmentalist wackos sucking off the public dole picked 5 commodities. They picked nickel, tin, they picked tungsten, they picked chrome, they picked copper. Eldredge lost the bet. Another loss piling up in the loser column for this nonsense thrower. The real price of all 5 commodities went down in the 80s. And here's the thing, Simon, an economist, knew something that Eldredge, nonsense artists, did not know. He knew that we develop new ways of exploration, mining, refining. Future resources are often cheaper than acquiring current resources. In other words, future ways of acquiring oil are cheaper than present ways. And that was true. Think about the 90s. We didn't have fracking. We didn't have all the stuff that we have now. Necessity, mother of invention, that kind of thing. It's common sense when you just think about it. Simon, the economist, knew another indisputable fact, that over time, virtually all natural resources you can think of, oil, copper, mercury, coal, whatever, has gotten less scarce and more plentiful, therefore less expensive. This is easily established, by the way, by looking at price trends and resources historically. Adjusting for inflation over the long run, they always go down. Prices always go down, not up. Stop and think about that for a moment, because it probably sounds weird to you. It probably sounds the opposite of true, but it's not. It's a well-established fact. We tend to notice only in short terms. You tend to think only hand in front of your face. You tend to think of only the time you live in, and you don't factor in the magical element of human ingenuity. The leftists are always making this falsehood assumption, always making it. It's a materialist myth. It's a zero-sum game type of thing. What they basically do is they think only of the material parts of a resource. And it's kind of silly if you think about it, because resources just aren't there in a big pool or there in a big tank in the ground. We create resources. We create commodities. Gas, for example, which always rolls off the leftist lunatic lips, is something we created, by the way. Again, thinking is the greatest leftist kryptonite. Just think about things. For centuries, oil was viewed mainly, it was like this irritant pollutant. It was a glob. When people did find this bubbling stuff up on the surface, they weren't pleased about it. In 1840, somebody figured out how to refine, keyword refine, oil into kerosene. That was human ingenuity. That was creation. That was taking the elements of the earth and creating it. Sounds like the biblical model, right? The one we read about from God's word. Someone else then figured out how to turn kerosene into a useful commodity in illuminating lamps. Whales were, by the way, pretty pleased, because before that we were using whale oil in lamps. Saving the environment, by the way, with oil. Suddenly, there was a demand for petroleum, and in 1985, the first oil well was dug, 69 feet down in the ground. A guy named Edwin Drake, by the way, in western Pennsylvania, my own William Penn's Pennsylvania. I was raised in Pennsylvania. It rendered 15 barrels of that black stuff a day, now called black gold. It took off, that stuff took off with the invention of cars and the combustion engine. By the way, if leftists would have lived then, they would have been like, no combustion engine. No combustion engine. We need horse and buggy. Horse plop turds all over the road. That's the future, because we're progressive. Since then, we've learned how to explore, refine it, use it more effectively. It went from gurgling up and making a mess in some poor farmer's cornfield to changing the world. And what was the factor, I ask you? The ingenuity of man. That the big government always gets in the way of. That's the key point. That's what you need to drive home, and that's what you need to tell your friends. Most resources are only resources because human beings are involved in some way. The matter in a material resource matters a whole lot less than the human being creatively transforming it. It's the creative human being that's the real moneymaker. The elements in that thing are just sitting there until somebody does something with it. And that's working fine until some leftist comes along and tries to tax it or halt it or regressively stop it. Oh, they want the benefits, of course. But everybody else needs to. Al Gore wants to stop it because he wants carbon credits.
Those are the feelings.
And we're talking about oil because that's the obsession with the left, but it's not just oil. Wood is transferred into fuel, into lumber, straw, into baskets, clay into pots, bricks into buildings, fur into coats, fields into farms, iron into walls and spears, cotton into clothing, copper into phone lines, sand into computer chips, and fiber optic cables, light into lasers. It's unbelievable when you think about it. It's ingenuity. It's free markets. It's capitalism. It's shared goods. It's shared commodities. It's serving your fellow man with your God-given abilities. And I'm so sick and tired of the regressive left stopping it. And by the way, capitalists and conservatives and people who love prosperity and love imagination, we don't just figure out how to use resources more effectively. We discover how to create and fundamentally discover completely different types of resources. And at every stage, you got some doomsday leftists scribbling down some math. The current level of resources will be depleted, therefore you must give me the power of the... Roll up your sleeves and create something. Do something. Don't just lust after power, gain power, and then puppeteer all the other people that are actually contributing, actually making life better. No, we must control and allocate and dictate, and we must be in charge of divvying things up. It makes me sick. It's the antithesis of everything that I'm about. And they've always been like this. Back in the 1600s, England was, there's lumber shortages. It got so severe in the 1700s that people feared the complete loss of wood. And what happened? Wood became too costly to fuel homes and fuel businesses and encourage innovation. And they found another resource, coal. Forests are back up and running. See, it wasn't complaining or doomsdaying. It was ingenuity, problem solving. This is hardly inevitable. It takes effort. It takes ingenuity. It takes willpower. It takes the role of prices. It takes scarcity, creative conspiring. And here's the thing that drives me nuts. Everybody talks about alternative energies. I love alternative energies. And we would have likely been here right now. We would have likely found the alternative. But the big, fat, bloated, bureaucratic, fail government keeps getting in the way, keeps wasting money on Solyndra and the like, instead of letting markets and ingenuity solve our problems. Solve our problems. Government doesn't solve our problems. People solve our problems. Big government makes small, tiny, non-creative, non-productive people. And you need to know that. Economists everywhere have been doomsday predicting that coal's going to run out, that petroleum's going to run out, that oil's going to run out, predicting, nail-biting, oil-strained dust predictions. And in fact, energy's just gotten cheaper and cheaper over time. It's a fact. Think about it. And by the way, it's become less scarce and far less costly. You can go into a building, a coffee shop, an airport, and you get free electricity for your laptops, for your phone, random outlets all over the country. This would be unthinkable in times of, say, Edison. Think about that. They've been predicting this stuff, and they're always wrong. And we just keep swallowing it up and granting these clowns power. The founder of OPEC, who I'm not a big fan of, said something that I think is kind of cool. He said the Stone Age came to an end not for a lack of stones, and the Oil Age will come to an end not for a lack of oil, but because of innovation, because of people, because of creativity, not because of government regulations. And I swear, these guys, they really do think that all commodities, money, anything cool, basically think of everything good. And the left thinks it's all in this fixed pot called energy. Oh my gosh, we do not love nature. 20% of the population uses 80% of the world's energy. There's not enough energy to go around, and there's not enough for all the peoples to live like we live. And the planet is just running out of everything. And we're awful. We need to stop having plumbing in every house. And it's awful, I say. I'm about to play for you a UN bureaucrat lunatic, environmentalist whack job lunatic, regressive, horse and buggy, Dark Ages psychopath, which, by the way, Barack Obama's administration is crawling in bed with and sacrificing your free natural rights at the altar of these lunatics. Listen to this person.
Clear fact that projections have us growing in our population capacity. We're already pushing on the boundaries of the planet, both with food and water, and energy, just because of the carbon-intensive technologies that we've been using for 100 years. It really is a big question. What are we going to do? Not only do we have that situation, but we have that situation in the context of global climate change. Even without climate change, even without the forcing of climate, it would still be a challenge. But with climate change, that challenge is amplified, it is magnified, because that is what climate change does.
Okay, well, first off, it's a really good thing that we don't have global warming nonsense, that you charlatans and snake oil salesmen are always propagating for your own power. That's number one. Number two, you're completely wrong. And isn't it amazing that even today in 2015, this bureaucratic UN empty suit, genocide-enabling clown gets to run around and talk about overpopulation when the whole world's population can sit in Idaho comfortably. And Eldridge and all these previous doomsday population bomb predictors have already been laughed off the scene, so they just repackage it in new wrapping paper and crap it back out to the public. Among many myths and delusional statements that she just made, she's basically suffering from the freeze frame myth, which again is another regressive leftist Achilles heel in their thinking. They assume that all we're going to produce is what we're producing at the moment, which, by the way, is not true. We had a Peace Prize winner, Nobel Peace Prize winner, that revolutionized the way we yield grain, the way that we yielded rice, the way that we yielded corn. It changed the whole world and fed millions of people. If you would have listened to this UN clown, none of that's possible. We're all going to die. By the way, give me more power. It's just infuriating. By the way, the Earth is not a closed system. We get energy from a lot of different places. Sunlight, for example, wind waves, currents, uranium. Again, the only energy that they see is the energy right now. By the way, hundreds and hundreds of years of fossil fuel energy has just been found. Energy being produced at the moment. That little verb changes everything, doesn't it? The question is, who's producing it? Usable energy isn't just sitting in a battery somewhere for this bureaucrat to turn on her microphone. It's not like a first come, first serve. Somebody plops more dinner chow on their plate and the next guy behind him gets screwed. That's not how it is. Somebody's actually producing this. Again, we've covered this. Somebody's taking natural resources and turning them into commodities. Something refining. Somebody's creating. Some places produce and thus buy more energy than other places. The problem isn't that some places are producing and buying ample energy and some places aren't. By the way, it's conservatives. It's people like myself that want the poor to have energy. It's leftists that are trying to keep them from having it because of the carbon footprint that they invent. This stuff's infuriating. We talk about poor third world countries that are basically being left to just being left to just circle and circle like a holding pattern in their squalor. Because Joni Mitchell wants to sing about, give me holes in my apples, give me the birds and the bees. Or the left lets millions of people die of malaria because they ban DDT. And then what do you know? Again, the left turns out to be wrong. Whoopsie daisies. Whoopsie daisies, all these African corpses because of our nonsense. Whoopsies. Uh-oh. Let it have a couple more decades and then we'll start spouting the same nonsense again. What these people are is they're zero-sum, two-dimensional, flatland world inhabitants. That's what they are. The circle can't imagine the three-dimensional world. I'm convinced of it. They can't imagine something called a sphere. You're tempted to think of resources strictly in the framework of a tiny little slice in time and place. And that's narcissism, and that's basically what the left consists of. But there's many dimensions. There's time and there's human. The most important dimension in economics, especially in regards to resources, human creativity, and we've been over that. Change over time. Free markets over time. Human knowledge, creativity builds upon itself. That's why we're not still rubbing sticks together for heat. By the way, again, is it not amazing these people get to call themselves progressives? And they can talk about change and hope. and then pull the reins back on everything that's wonderful about humanity. By the way, it's kind of fun, I think, to imagine if there wasn't a big, fat, ineffective, regressive government, how quickly, I mean, the resources of the future, what they could be, it's just amazing. You can only guess what will replace oil, but when it becomes too expensive. By the way, we won't run out of it, it'll just become too expensive. It could be fission reactors, uranium rods, by the way. Nuclear power right now is amazing. The left opposes it, of course. Safer than the alternatives that we have. France runs 70% of their energy as a nation on nuclear power. We run nuclear subs across the globes on nuclear power. Some people predicted if something happened stateside, those subs would be able to continue to survive for millennia. It's kind of a crazy thought, actually. I like to think about what would it be? What could it be? Could it be the cold from seawater? You're harnessing atomic reaction. You could have energy-rich fission. You could have something much more exotic. This is not my idea. I've heard this before, but I think this is kind of clever, where you have some sort of like paint. You could just paint something on any surface, and it'll be able to capture usable energy from the sun. I mean, that's Star Trek, but who knows? And my point is that if you turn the free market on it, the free economy loose, we have far more reason to have wide-eyed wonder and to be excited about it. And if we don't, we're going to have disaster, because big, fat governments bring disaster, and that's just a fact. Well, it's been a long podcast, but refuting leftist myth with substance takes time, and I hope that's what you got here. I went over case by case by case why they're wrong, why they're emotive, why they're exploiting you, and I hope that you share this podcast, share this research, share this. I want to advise a great book. This guy's great. J.W. Richards, Money, Greed, and God, Why Capitalism is the Solution and Not the Problem. Ladies and gentlemen, come on, we got to fight back with substance. I know it's not as sexy as TMZ slandering, but if you are a serious mind, you got to seriously think about this stuff. And when you do, you stop emoting. And when you stop emoting, you start voting conservative. Be a people of great fortitude, character, and above all, courage.
There is nothing wrong with the planet. Nothing wrong with the planet. The planet is fine. Deceit to think that somehow we're a threat, that somehow we're going to put in jeopardy this beautiful little blue-green ball that's just floating around the sun. The planet has been through a lot worse than us. Been through all kinds of things worse than us. Been through earthquakes, volcanoes, plate tectonics, continental drift, solar flares, sunspots, magnetic storms, the magnetic reversal of the poles, bombardment by comets and asteroids and meteors, worldwide floods, tidal waves, worldwide fires, erosion, cosmic rays, recurring ice ages, and we think some plastic bags and some aluminum cans are going to make a difference?
Hey, folks, tonight I want to talk about global warming. Now, the world is flat and hot society is growing increasingly hysterical, and that indeed is causing me to sweat a little. In the last month or so, I've heard suggestions that those skeptical of Al Gore's spiritual crisis are deniers. And one good way to serve the planet would be to have one less kid. I've also read that mankind is, quote, a virus, and human beings are, quote, the AIDS of the earth. Global warming is officially becoming creepy, and I can't tell yet if it's fascistic or fetishistic, but it's kind of like piercing or tattoos. I don't even want to get one because I see how hooked people are, and it spooks me. I just find it odd. We've come to a point in history where if I don't concede that Manhattan will be completely submerged in the year 2057, I'm thought to be a delusional contrarian by some of my more zealous fellow citizens. I'm sorry, Angst Squad, but if we commissioned a public works project, let's call it the Manhattan Project, and tried our hardest to submerge Manhattan in the next 50 years, we couldn't pull it off, mainly because it wouldn't be environmentally sound, and you guys would hang it up in the permitting process. Simply put, I can't worry about the Earth right now because I'm too worried about the world. Why can't I take terrorism as seriously as Al Gore takes global warming? There are times you think that liberals only fear car bombs if they have leaky exhaust systems. And why am I constantly beaten over the head with the phrase, quote, the delicate balance of nature? Am I the only one who watches Animal Planet? Every time I turn it on, I see some demented harp seal chucking penguins down his gullet like they were maitre d' tic tacs. To me, nature always appears more unbalanced than Gary Busey with a clogged eustachian tube. Listen, the weather is just like Hillary's explanation of her war vote. We just don't know, do we? We're hit or miss on next Tuesday's weather, much less the year 2057. Relax. We'll replace oil when we need to. American ingenuity will kick in, and the next great fortune will be made. It's not pretty, but it is historically accurate. We need to run out of oil first. And that's why I drive an SUV, so we run out of it more quickly.
The naysayers, they are being marginalized.
Boy, you insist on flying right in the face of scientific fact, don't you?
I don't believe in global warming. Come and sing it now. I don't believe in global warming. Come and sing with me. Ooh.
We're going to have to work on those folks.
Scientific fact.
There are atmospheric rays which control bodily motions. Now, if a person containing negative or hexam qualities gets between you and them rays, he creates a static that jars any successful motion into an unsuccessful motion and jinxes you. And that is a scientific fact.
And that is also the biggest crock of nothing I ever heard.
The climate has always changed. The climate is changing. The climate will continue to change. Humankind does not have the power to do very much about it, and we would be arrogant to assume that we can. In every opinion poll, now a majority of those polled say they do not believe that global warming is significantly or dangerously caused by humankind.
He played on our fears. Those are the feelings.
Join the Courage Culture. Agroclole Productions.